Hello and welcome back to another episode of You Want to Do What with Dan and Julie. Today we've got Olivia Smith on, who is a public historian and TV researcher. Hi, Olivia.
Hi guys, thanks for having me on.
Our pleasure. How are we today?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you both?
Yeah, good.
Yeah,
Looking
good,
forward to
thank you.
a long weekend.
Oh, I know, aren't we all?
I can't believe it's going to be freezing cold there, apparently.
Oh, it's so English. Could it not
Oh,
be more
absolutely.
English though?
So
Monday and Tuesday were gorgeous as well.
I got sunburned on Monday. This is typical, isn't it?
That's very English as well. Olivia, shall we jump straight in? Do you want to tell everyone a little bit about what you actually do?
Yeah, I feel like when I was looking at questions, I was like, what on earth do I do? Like I summarized it that I'm a public historian. I think I can come back to that a bit later on. But like I didn't want to be those traditional boring kind of historians. No slack to anyone who's listening, but I wanted to do something a bit different, and that's education. I always knew I wanted to do history. I never wanted to be a teacher. I did dabble in that thought at one point, but I thought, what can I do that's educating? But you don't force people, if that makes sense. So it's like, how can people enjoy history that's not in a classroom?
Mm-hmm.
So I work in TV right now as one element of it. So across like historical documentaries and stuff. And the aim is to kind of end up in like period films and dramas, because I
How
love
cool.
the idea that you can bring history to life. I
Yeah,
think
that's
it's
so
just
cool.
utterly fascinating. And I've got my own podcast. So it's my shameless little plug there, Khaki Malarkey. I do like blogs and all these kind of just like different bits. I dip and dabble all the time. I think that's
Yeah.
the best way to describe my career.
We had Alice on, who works for History Hit.
Yes, Dan's podcast. And just-
Yes, and like
fantastic.
video, like Netflix platform essentially
yeah.
for history.
Oh, it's brilliant.
So cool. So is that kind of the world you want to get into, that kind of production of history documentaries and things like that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I met Dan. I was such fangirl. He followed me on Twitter last year, and I couldn't believe it. Like little old me, I thought, God, getting such recognition from someone like Dan. So I was quite cheeky, and this is very me. I just slid into his DMs, was like, "Would you like to meet for a coffee? To have you got any advice and stuff?" And he's so kind. I then ended up meeting him and his production team. This is just before the lockdown, off in a pub off Oxford Circus, and he was so kind and had all these ideas and was basically like, it'd be great to get you on the team if ever. And obviously
wow.
then the lockdown happened. So I think it's on the back burner, but I think he knows that I will be knocking on his door. If ever the opportunity comes, I will pest my way into his organisation if possible. So Dad, if you're listening.
Hopefully he's listening. That'd be cool,
Yeah.
wouldn't it? We're both big history buffs, so we're excited to get you on and have a chat. So what sort of period of history are you really into?
Yeah, what is this public historian?
Oh my God. So I think that this is why I say I'm a public historian, because like I look up to the likes of like Dan Snow, Greg Jenner, and I think, how can you have a career and you are doing so many different areas of history, where I see a lot of historians and then one area of history, and I thought that's just not me. As I said before, I dip and dab, and I'm like, there's so much areas of history. Like I don't want to be, it's like being in a relationship. You don't want to be stuck to one person forever. Well, some people do. I'm in my early 20s. It's not for me right now. But I don't want to be with one area of history forever, because there's so much to do. So for me, I'd say I'm finding my niche now a bit more. I was kept saying I was in like a historical identity crisis, not knowing where I'm going, what I'm doing. But for me, I'd say it's kind of more like women's history, because I do believe there's this huge treasure trove of history there that no one really knows about, and we're still every year, especially we've just come out of Women's History Month, that we're learning so much, and I would like to positively contribute to that education of it. But then that's how I got really into my history career, was through military history stuff. So my heart will kind of always be with that area of it all, but I'm broadening my horizons, so to speak.
So how does it work with being a public historian? Have you studied this at university?
Yeah, so I always knew I wanted to do history. it was definitely on the cards for me, especially when I was doing my A levels. I was doing other subjects. I thought, I don't want to be doing these. I just want to be doing history. And even at my GCSE, I loved history, but I didn't know I could do it. I didn't know I was good. And I thought, I did triple science and everything else. And I thought, I'm going to come out of my A's and all my sciences. I got C's in all of them, but I got 100% in all my history exams. And I was like, oh, I enjoy this. And I actually can do it at the same time. And when the same thing happened, I got like 100% in all my A levels. I was like, oh, well, this kind of makes sense now. I've got like this academic proof that something I love, I can follow. So when I did my degree, it was so good to kind of, I don't know, for me, the best thing was like not knowing what I was doing, because I just enjoyed the degree process. And then when I handed my dissertation in, I was so sad. Everyone else was so happy. And I was like, I love doing this so much. What can I do? And I spoke to my supervisor about it, and she's like, you can do a master's, which is basically like another dissertation. It was 30,000 words to kind of broaden your research like skills, etc. And I thought, well, I have no clue what I'm doing with my life. I might as well get a master's that will help me get from one stage maybe to another in terms of jobs, and continue doing something I love. And that kind of was, it all fell into place really nice for me, I feel.
So what did you write your master's on then?
So my master's looked at the First World War centenary, and it was all about popular memory. So I'll ask you to this, what I always do. So what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of the First World War?
Trenches.
Or the end of empire, I guess.
Somme, I guess.
Oh, okay. End of Empire is very interesting, but like the trenches and the Somme is like so typical, because our popular memory of the war is this constant of like blood, mud, death, trenches, you know, Somme, Ypres, Passchendaele, whatever, all these things that you have. And because years since basically the armistice, the memory of the war has changed so much within 100 years that when it reached the centenary in 2014, the war memory was so different to what it would have been in 1918. So then throughout the 4 years of the centenary, we've commemorated, we've oddly celebrated, but one of the key things that was constantly honed in on during the centenary was death. You know, so what the centenary, I think, in the UK did, and this is what I looked at, is invariably reinforced the popular connotations of like death, mud, blood to people, so that when you think of the First World War, you're constantly reminded of the awful side of it. But no one really thinks of the fact that 80% of the British kind of soldiers, they came home.
Yeah,
but
I'm pretty sure after World War One, there was more people died of flu than World War One.
Exactly. Yeah, the Spanish flu. Exactly. But we don't think of that side of it. But I call it's like a snowball effect. It's like since then it's rolled, and things have threaded into it throughout the years. You know, there was a chap in the 60s, I think he wrote, going back to my master's now, it's been so long, but he wrote a book called Lions Led by Donkeys, and you know, that's kind of a phrase we hear now with politicians and other things, but that really changed how people perceive the war. Then you have things like Blackadder in the 80s, and how that really again enhanced this kind of memory and a negative connotation to it. So then by the time we have it now, when we've got no veterans left to testify against these views, that we have this shared national belief that people are going, yes, the First World War was so awful, muddy, bloody, people died in their thousands because lions led by donkeys. And that's the summary of my master's.
Wow. So what is the opinion you're arguing? It wasn't as awful, or it was different to what we're told?
I think I would say that it's different to what we're told. Like,
okay.
It's so my undergraduate dissertation, that's how I really enjoy doing that, and that's how I thread into my master's. So for my undergraduate dissertation, I looked at a book called Testament of Youth. It's a war autobiography by Vera Brittain, and she wrote that in 1933, and it was basically her war kind of memoir of the war. But she's writing this, I have to do quick maths here, so I'm a historian, not a mathematic, I don't know, 10 plus years after the war.
Yeah.
And her memory by this point's changed. At this point, she's a pacifist. She's experienced the grief, the heartache of what she went through in the First World War. So naturally, her memory's changed from her actual war diary. If you compare the two, you know there's a difference in it. But people in 1933 are hailing her book as like the memoir of a lost generation. You know, they're believing every word she said. And then in the 70s, there was a TV series by the BBC on her book. And again, that kind of is playing up on what's going on in the 70s. A bit of it's a feminist kind of revival here instead. And then in 2015 they released the film with Scott Kit Harington in, a couple other famous actors and actresses, and again that hones in on the mud, blood, trenches, death kind of thing. So there's a lot of ways that you can look and say how the war has invariably changed over 100 years because of the social cultural kind of effects around it.
That is super interesting, because that must happen to every single period of history you look at. And as a historian, I guess your kind of role is to unpick that and see, this is what we think of it as, but this is the facts that we've got. Like, I can't believe that statistic you said, like 80% of the people that went to World War One came home.
Yeah, definitely. I remember when I first read that and I had to, like, history Twitter's mental. And I remember putting a tweet, I've been like, is this true? Like, this is definitely a real fact, because like every commemorative service, every armistice, every, in the centenary, the Tower of London put out like over 800,000 poppies around the moat and stuff. But that was to mark like each man Commonwealth that had died. So you never forget. Everyone talks about the dead, but you never then go, well, actually, so many men did come home. There's never that reflection.
So I think it's not about taking away from, bad things happened and it was awful. No. It's just about looking at the, the perspective of how we look at history, right?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. It's the fact that we've got this huge kind of like, it's like a massive circle when you've got all of this history in it, and then bang in the center is what we always look at, but no one's looking like going further beyond it to get to the outside edges.
So what sort of happened to, after you've handed your thesis in, what was the journey for you after that?
Oh my God, the first kind of 3 months were awful, because like I'm very much a person of, I don't like sitting around. I like to be busy. I like to be proactive. And again, I finished my master's and was like, what the hell am I doing in my life? I have no clue. I was looking for opportunities, but it's so hard, as everyone knows, for this job market. It's like, I thought I had a master's, which gave me the one up, but then so does every Tom, Dick and Harry. And I ended up applying for the 3 internships with Greg Jenner, and because he runs the fantastic podcast as well, and he does other little side projects, and he personally shortlisted me for all 3 of them. And I sat and had an hour phone call with him, which for me, a fangirl again, was fascinating to talk to him about it. And he kind of unplucked maybe what I couldn't see in front of me of what I want to do. And he said, it sounds like you might want to actually end up in TV and doing all this other stuff. It kind of pointed me in the direction of some people that I could be in contact with before I heard back from his internship. So then quite literally an hour later, he then rang me again to say I actually couldn't qualify for his internships because this is one specifically for students. And literally the day before, I finished my master's.
Oh.
So I was gutted, because I thought I had that glimmer of hope to be like, oh my God, I'm finally getting some really valuable experience with a big name historian. Like, this is going to be huge for me. And then it was just taken away even quicker. But it was a TV kind of idea. I think if I ever win a BAFTA, I'll have to always thank Greg because like he really was the starting point for me. So by luck then, this is December, January, I saw as a TV kind of jobs company called Production Base, and they wanted a military history researcher. And I literally the Friday night typed up a application, didn't think anything of it. And the Monday morning I was like, you know what, I'll have a look. And I looked and was like, oh my God, they want me to ring. And I rang them up. I had to take my dog to the vets, my mum. So I was in the car park ringing this woman up, and she's like, okay, can you come this afternoon and start? And I was like, what?
Wow.
No, wait. And I was in Norfolk at the time, and I said, and by chance I was actually then going down the next day to spend 2 weeks house sitting for my aunt who lives in North London. And I went, I can be with you tomorrow in the office. And she went, cool, come in for 11. I got the job. I was only meant to be for 2 weeks. They then realised my history kind of geekiness, and had just got commissioned by the History Channel a World War II series that was going out for the 75th anniversary of VE Day last year. And they went like, okay, we now want you to be the head researcher. And I then bagged the job for 6 months, which was
God.
Awesome.
Insane.
Well, what does that involve to be a head researcher on a TV program, a documentary like that?
It's just like you work so close with the kind of producer. Our producer was fantastic. She didn't have a history background, so I was then very lucky to bring in a friend of mine. We hadn't worked together, but we had done the same internship but at different stages, so I knew his military history kind of background, so we had like a good team with us. And you basically require such a long process, and this was so January, and we had to get our final cuts done by end of March, beginning of April for like the first 3 episodes. So that gave us like 2 and a bit months to do the research, do the filming, do the voiceovers, do the edits, check everything, and have it delivered to the channel, which my like kind of producer was like, this is seriously intense. And I think it was a really good kind of moment to be thrown into the TV world first off, because it helped me learn so much. So we create like research packs for each episode, and this is like a 50-page research pack, and everything has to be, especially for me with the history background, it was all historically accurate, because the last thing you want is anyone to sit there and go, that's not right, and then they slate you for your work. So we made sure we were so perfect from the off, and then don't
you think accuracy in history, when people say that's not accurate, it's so difficult to be accurate in history because you're playing off different sources and people say different things, so like it's so hard to be accurate.
Oh, it's so hard. And this was our worry. I mean, so the channel it was for the History Channel, and the History Channel within historians actually doesn't have the best reputation. And so I was very worried about this being my first kind of TV project, and what if it was completely slammed by, you know, historians in the field. And so that for me was a big motivating factor to make sure that we weren't going to slip up at all. And this even included going through, so to make it difficult, this company, brilliant, but they were more big company in America and Latin America, and we were the London base. So we did all of our pre and post production here in the UK, and obviously during the pandemic, but our post production was in Mexico. So they wouldn't wake up till 4 o'clock. Then we'd get emails through for an hour, and then we'd wake up the next day with like, can I swear?
Yeah.
Like, just like a shit ton of emails from them basically. And we would then be sat there going, oh my God, here we go. And the language barrier is an issue, because if we weren't polite, they kicked off in a way. And I was then getting frustrated being like, this is not the right fucking helmet. You cannot have this with this episode and the context. And I remember one of the episodes we got back, and I call it, have you guys watched Band of Brothers?
Yes.
So I researched our episode 5, and I made sure it was like the Band of Brothers episode. So it's like D-Day, Market Garden, Bastogne, going through to kind of like the end of the war near enough. And I was really kind of chuffed with myself. It got structured, like it proved to be structured like that.
Yeah.
But when they sent the rough cut through, because it was like archive and interview, so we had the interviews done by fantastic historians, and then we sent off some of the archive, and they came back, and near enough, I think I had for every 30 seconds or near for every 20 seconds a comment going no. And it was, so they did not like it, but we were like, we're not going to sit here and just let this be inaccurate.
Yeah, I think that's kind of going back to, you know, some historians don't like the History Channel. I guess the History Channel is trying to do it in a way where, you know, it's a popular appeal, where the history buffs, like I guess me, you and Judy, you know, I love it to be accurate and you know, actually portray what happened, instead of, you know, they've got that Ancient Alien series or whatever it is.
But Mountain Man's brilliant.
That's the issue.
Yeah,
exactly. They have some great stuff. I mean, Dan Jones does some fantastic series on there and everything. And I think they, especially now it's Sky History, I think there's a huge potential for it. But I think it's the alien stuff that just does not do it credibility at all, because you know it's bullshit. Like
yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? But for, you know, in the world of history, obviously you've got your masters in history. What's the kind of career field look like? So, you know, you've got TV, you've got you know, the academic side, but where can the history degree lead? I
think it can. This is what I've always been told. It can lead anywhere, because like the history degrees, the skills you get, you know, and I don't know if it's because I'm dyslexic, but I always found my analytical skills were really, really good, but I can't put a sentence together kind of thing. It's a very odd situation, but they don't really care about that. And I think a lot of people don't actually realise the extent you can do. You know, I never anticipated that I would end up in a TV career at all. You know, like I said earlier on, I contemplated teaching, I contemplated battlefield guiding, because like that's really how I started off this journey for myself, is when I was able to actually live on the First World War battlefield.
Didn't you see Mike Tyndall and a load of rugby boys?
Yeah. Do you want to know how that come about?
Yeah.
Oh my God, because I know you guys are rugby fans as well, and you've had Payno on.
Yes.
How did you resist not calling him Payno though?
It was so hard.
Oh, I listened to that. I was like, guys, you had your moment. But no, that was insane. So when I got picked for this internship, it goes back to near enough like 2015. I went out with my college on a battlefield trip because this again was during the centenary, and I did not realize the magnitude of it. I'd never been over there before, and this is on the Somme and the Ypres salient, so the key places of the Western Front. And I got kind of hooked, and I definitely got that emotional hook. Like, I don't know any family who were in the First World War. I've got German family, and I know my great granddad was in the kind of occupied Holland with the Nazis. So I don't know much else other than that. But going, I found it so incredible, and I thought I want to be a part of history. And I wanted even then to be like, how can I help and contribute and know that I've done my bit in the centenary? So I dragged my dad back over for the Somme centenary in 2016, and then I was very lucky and I dragged him over again for the Passchendaele one in 2017. And there I met some great people who were like, come back to November with us and we'll show you the ropes, we'll show you about. They're all kind of older people, to say the least, not to be disrespectful, but they know their stuff. They've been around for ages, and that was really valuable for me. And they then introduced me to some interns there, and I was chatting to them, and afterwards I rang my dad and was like, yeah, that's going to be me. I'm determined on this. So a month later, I applied for the job. By January, we went for like this big kind of, they've narrowed us down. I think it's for 200 people applied, and we got narrowed down to 40. And we were in this kind of hotel. It's very like an open interview, and they basically were like, here are your commissioners, sell yourselves. Like,
wow.
Why? What's good? You know, how can you impress us in a way? And oh my God, it was so nerving to go around and chat to people and try to be like the best person you could be. And then in the afternoon, we had like a 12-table interview, and I was with the Director General. She was sat next to me, and I was watching her notes. I could not decipher what she was doing at all, but I just think I chatted so much that I hoped I stood out. And obviously I did, because I got the job. And so I literally, for me, it was in July. I graduated the Friday, the Monday, boom, I was over in France. And between that time, I saw Lewis Moody is very interested in First World War history and kind of all
he's
that
a bit of a history buff, isn't
he?
he?
He's a big history buff. I had some great chats with him about it. Like, it's really nice that a lot of the rugby guys are quite into it, because there's huge connections with rugby in history as well, especially the First World War. And I tweeted him that I was like, oh, I'm now going to be an intern. Like, if you're ever out in the Somme, Lewis, come say hello, because there's me sliding into whoever's DMs because just networking like mad. And I then, by chance, one of the guys so it's called a charity called Rugby for Heroes, and he messaged me saying, well, actually, we're going to be cycling from Twickenham to Compiègne, which is where the armistice was signed in 1918, and we'd love to have a tour. And I thought, oh my God, this is insane. Like, how have I sorted this out? And obviously Mike Tyndall was leading he was a celebrity cyclist, and they came over, and this was the final weekend in August, I believe. And I was so nervous, and I got there really early, and they were a bit delayed and stuff. And I was kind of waiting around, and the first lot turned up before the cyclists. So I had to do one whole tour with them. And then I had to do another tour when Mike and everyone else turned up. And I remember the first thing, I was chatting with Mike, and he was like, God, I've just got such a bad wedgie. And I was like, oh my God, here I am. I've just met Mike Tyndall. I'm talking to him about his crotch. Like, this is bad. And so we did the tour, and what Mike did is thank God this is when he didn't have Instagram, but he live streamed me on his Twitter. The whole, I'm sure you can probably go back and find it, but he live streamed the whole thing, and my nerves then went through the roof because of that. And I just thought, no, deep breaths, let's just do it. And so I designed the tour specifically for them to be about the rugby players on the memorial, because there was an old Scottish captain, there was 2 kind of real English guys, loads on there. And then at the end we finished, and I've got on my phone like a really funny live video, and it kind of just like, where did you find her, guys? And someone's like, on the internet. And I'm just like, oh, for Christ's sake, you sound so awful. But that was so fun. And then the next day I got to go down to Compiègne, where they did a charity match with the Compiègne team. And I was having a couple of pints with Mike Tyndall, which was just wicked. Insane.
What a story.
I know.
Wow.
Yeah. And he wasn't the only people we met. Like, it's weird how the First World War is, I don't know how I can describe it. Like, we all think of it as maybe not something that celebrities would be interested in. Like, is it cool, if that makes sense?
Mm.
And like for us, like one of the cool things was we were stood there, and one of my like the guys I worked with went, "Oh my god, is that Bear Grylls?" And we were like, "What?" And we looked, and there he was with his family, and we were like, "Oh my god, that's Bear Grylls." So we went over and said hello and stuff, and then the battlefield guide with us, and we were like, "How can we get his attention?" Like, and we had a key. So the memorial we worked at Tipval, you can't let public up to the top due to health and safety reasons. And so that day we had done, because we were on media duties and we had to let cameras up there and stuff. And this is at the very end of the day, and we literally went up to Bear and we were like, "Do you want to go up?" He's like, "No one else can." So we took him out to the memorial, and we were doing like telling him all this stuff, and his kids and everything were there, and his wife, and he just then goes, "God, this is so cool, but I wish I had my parachute because I'd so jump off right now." I was like, "Are you kidding me?"
What?
All the things to say, like.
So it's easy to say that history's really unlocked this whole world for you. You know, you've been doing the battlefield tours. You know, you're working in TV. It, like you're saying, it can really lead to some amazing things.
Yeah, it really has. I mean, for me, I think the real standout and most incredible moment when I was in France was being able to give French President Macron and then Theresa May, our Prime Minister, a tour.
Oh,
And
wow.
that was insane because like we had all heard, so this is coming up for the armistice, and obviously like this is 100 years since silence on the Western Front. It was so poignant, but we had heard it was Trump coming over, and we all went, "Nah, if it's Trump, we're not doing it. Like, we don't care, we're just not." But then when it got changed to being Macron and May, and we were like, "Okay, we can do this." And it was mad. Like the day itself, we had to get to site so early. We had to be on Good Morning Britain to start off with quick filming. Then we had to go get ready, and it was just like a waiting day. And the weird thing was we had our base in like the gardener's site, and I walked in and there was like this posh Audi in there. I was like, "Oh, it's a fancy car, who's here?" And then these two chaps were like loading up their snipers, and I was like, oh my god, this means business. So, and then as I walked out to go walk around the memorial, because they shut it all off due to security, they had no word of a lie. I think I counted now 20 trucks of the gendarmes, and obviously that's the French paramilitary police. It's not like our policemen. These boys mean business, and somehow they hid themselves around. So when it came to us doing our tour, there was 8 snipers on the memorial pointing at us at high, and I was like, "This is just bizarre. If we take one step out of line, like we're gone."
Terrifying.
There was 300 gendarmes hidden that you just couldn't see, and then right behind us was the world's press pen. And like, I now know how some celebrities might feel in a way, because the shutters are so daunting, and like having all of that on you just to then try and talk to 2 world leaders was insane. Like, even saying it now, I'm like, "Well, that happened." Like, this isn't so real.
Cool. So obviously we've all been in lockdown for a while, but what is it you do now? How is an average day for you like at the moment?
Yeah, so I'm working in TV. The joy thing for me about TV is that it's so project-based work, and I think that's reflected on how much I love doing my dissertation, my master's, because it was like a project at a time. So since lockdown, I've kind of been across 6 productions now, which is so bizarre to think, TV's just still running. There's so much you can actually do from home that doesn't require you to be filming or anywhere else. So I'm currently working for WAG TV on a First and Second World War series. I think I can say it because it's a returning series. It's War Factory Series 3, which is kind of
Factory.
I'm now doing, here we go, Series 3 is coming out, and I'm now doing the pre-production of that. So it's just like getting the huge episodes kind of research packs together. Obviously, my director again wants it to be very historically accurate, but with this, it's kind of like a numbers game. So it's like how were factories so influential in the war? These. And I've just kind of covered over. I'm not going to reveal what the episodes are, obviously, but I didn't think it was as cool as it is. So
it is. Do you know what blew my mind? I was watching an episode, and it was about the Nazis and their war factories versus America and our war factories.
Yeah.
And how at the beginning of the war, the Nazis had this really state-of-the-art technology. Their tanks, not at the start of war, but through the war, they built up state-of-the-art technology, and their guns were like much better, and their tanks were much better. But they couldn't build anything. So like by like 1942 or something, you'll probably correct me on the dates, but they couldn't win the war. there was no way they were going to win the war.
Yeah,
because
they fluffed it up a bit, didn't they?
Yeah, because they couldn't build anything. Like America, for example, were producing like thousands of tanks versus Germany's, like a few hundred. So like there was no way they were going to produce enough equipment to win the war. And I
Yeah.
thought that series was just because you never think about that.
No, you don't. That's exactly what I'm finding this so interesting. So I'm like, oh, it's not your typical D-Day, whatever kind of type stories. It's like the real nitty gritty, what's going on behind the scenes, because obviously you need these things to be producing for the war effort. And like, I've just really, what you've just said is, the Nazis didn't actually start rearming properly until 1935. They started doing bits of it, but then you've got 4 years until you've declared war. But what they were able to do when they were taking over like Czechoslovakia and all these other countries, they were able to obtain huge war factories and that kind of maximize their war effort. But even still, they weren't operating for like a total war until, I think I read this the other day, I don't want to be wrong, like 1942 to 1943, whereas the UK and the US were going at that from the off.
Yeah,
so
and then
it's like,
at that point it's too late, right?
So way too late.
They've poked the Russian bear, and it's all going Pete Tong.
Yeah, exactly. And you're just like, what the hell, you idiots? Like, you screwed yourselves from the start, and you made people go through crap for nearly 6 years for what?
Yeah, and you learn about their like government structure and how that held them back, and it's a great series. If anyone's listening and wants to watch the series, it's super interesting.
Yeah, 100%.
So regarding this particular TV series, do you like get given certain topics that you have to go away, find out the information, and then be able to present that back to be filmed and create a documentary from it?
Yeah, so in this stage, we're now in pre-production, and so this stage is really to like, how much information can we get together? So when you pitch a series to the channel, you basically have your episodes set. So a development researcher or a development AP has just gone together and put together like a really fantastic presentation that's with the channel with all the kind of basic information saying this is how we intend the show to go. They obviously approve it, that's been commissioned, and then you go off like the beat points that have been set for per episode, and you basically expand upon it because they've only given like some real basic info to the channel. So what I'm doing right now is getting as much information, stats, and obviously making sure that those stats are confirmed at least three times. And then my director for this particular channel, it is different for every production, but he will then kind of consume that, come back to me with say any more information he would like, research, maybe a bit more clarity, etc. And then once it's happy, he will then go do the mammoth task of putting it into a voiceover script. So obviously this is a type of series which is like archive and interview, because you'll have a talking head, a historian, then you'll also have the voiceover going on in the background, which is narrating it, as well as the archive that supports it. So really what I'm doing now is to make sure that voiceover is accurate for when people are watching it.
Wow, that's because you never think about all these aspects that go on with a TV series behind it, and like how many people are actually involved and what it takes.
Yeah, it's monumental. I think when I learned that last year, I was like, oh, this is the first time I've ever done it. But I think when I realized I actually wanted to carry on a career in TV is when every single step we made, I was like, it just makes sense. It felt like I had a little light bulb moment to be like, I now really understand how this whole process works.
Yeah, certainly. What would be some personality traits that you see in yourself that you think or what made you get to where you are?
Oh, determination. I think for me, like I said from the start, it's always been history for me. So I won't ever do something that's not history. So that's where I've ended up here. And this job I've just done, it was only 2 weeks ago that I'd actually had my contract paused. I'm not going to say the company and badmouth them, but I think they're a bit too cowardly to say we won't continue them on. They weren't the nicest of people. And I was very relieved, but this was the Tuesday lunchtime. And then by 5:30 when I finished, I got headhunted, and that was the first time I've been headhunted for a show to be like, hi, we need a researcher, can we have your references? And I was like, oh my god, this is just one door closed, another open. And so I think you just, if you want it, it's not out of your reach. But like everyone says with TV, you can easily get into it and stuff, but like It's sheer luck. It's like I said, my first one last year, I just was like, oh, all right, I'll send off the application thinking I've got no shot. I've never done this before. And by chance, they had a Second World War series commission that then led me to get all of the experience from pre-production all the way through to post-production kind of thing, which is very rare because since then I've only worked on, say, post-production or pre-production singularly. I've not done the whole thing as yet again. So it was really just luck and determination and networking. Oh my God, I network. Like I keep saying, I slide into DMs. I'm not afraid to ask, I know who those are in the field, and go, what advice have you got for someone like me starting out and saying, actually, I would like to go down the directing route, or what do I do? You know, I would love to be a feature in one episode of this as a talking head as well, because I want to show my capabilities to whatever I do. So I'm going to make that cheeky remark to my director in a couple of weeks and go, well, could I maybe sit in for one? You don't. My mum's always told me, you don't ask, you don't get. And that's
100%.
literally how I always approach this. And especially this year, after the crap everyone went through last year, my motto this year is really just to make shit happen. You know, it's unlike this recent job, it kind of fell into my lap, but nothing else really will. So I have to make it happen. The other day I actually applied. I saw there was a job for like a period type film, and I thought that's my next kind of career goal. I'd love to go into like period dramas and films, but I don't know how to do it. So I emailed them and just said, I'm not actually applying for this job, but I'm interested in period films and whatever, so could you keep me on your database? And they got back to me saying, we'd like to have a job interview with you on the 11th of April. And I'm like, what?
You're such a great example for any of our listeners. Whatever you want to go into jobs wise, this is the kind of, I guess, the attitude and the go get you need nowadays. You know, putting a CV in front of someone is all well and good, and sending a CV off to a company, do you know how many they get? Like thousands and thousands. You've got to put yourself out there and go the extra mile, right?
Definitely. That's why I say I'm not afraid to say messages like Dan Snow. It's daunting, but I want to flag myself up to him as someone who's keen and who's interested and who wants to learn. I've done it with other historians who I've known have worked in TV, because if there's ever an opportunity where I can help them, I always know 100% they will help me, and I flagged myself up to more people. And that's the valuable thing here. Like, it's constantly getting people going, oh, there's Olivia, this is what she's doing, what she's interested in.
Yeah. See, Dan Snow, if you're listening, reply to that DM. Come on the show. but for you, where are you going to take this? You know, you've done some incredible things already with your history degree, but where do you want to go? I know you mentioned period dramas, but do you want to become an actual historian that sits in there? You know, like what do you call them, the floating head? Is that right?
Like an expert. I think to be an expert, I was having a lovely chat with Alister Bruce, and he's the historical advisor for Downton Abbey, and luckily Alister is a trustee for the company I work for, the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. So I was very fortunate to have that connection through him, and he kind of said, you know, if you want to be one of those experts, you need to write a book, etc., because then it shows you are an expert in that particular area of history, and people will fall to you when they want that. So I have got an idea to potentially write a book, but that sounds like a lot of effort. I don't know right now. Well, I feel like if I build an idea together, it's always there as long as no one else does it. But I'm very, like I said, I can't sit around and do nothing. So I've always got these ideas floating. But I think for me, I'd love to end up with, I've already got the name for it. I need to copyright it, actually, of my own production company that does purely history documentaries, period TV series, and films. Yeah. That's my goal.
That'd be wicked. How cool would that be?
Oh, it'd be insane. I've already got a list on my phone. Anytime I come across a historical topic, I can actually envision how it could be a documentary, a drama, or a series. And I feel like I'm manifesting it now.
Yeah, it's so good. But you know, with this, you know, topic of history, there's so many avenues you can go down, isn't there? You know, how, if you advice for someone, is it just stick to one part and really become an expert in that? Or is it dip and, you know, dab into different parts?
I think it really just depends on what you're interested in. Like, I am so envious of people who are just purely passionate about the Romans or the Second World War, because then they can really become an expert in that field. And that's where you get that recognition. And I think I sit back and go, oh my God, how I don't want the attention and stuff, but I want to be recognized within the field. I want to contribute to it, but without having, for me, like that niche. I think I've struggled. But then I can remind myself, you've got Dan Snow, Greg Jenner, who are hugely successful. I mean, there's other women, Lucy Worsley, etc., who are hugely successful, but they're not experts in one field. They do different things. And I look and I think, I'm only 23 and they're in their 40s. So I know I've got a journey to go along. And I think my advice to be anyone is, if you enjoy it, just stick at it. Because like, what's the point in doing something you don't enjoy? That's always been my thing. I'm not going to do anything else because I know I won't enjoy it. But at least if I'm doing a job that's hard, but it's history related, I'm still loving it at the end of the day.
I think as a history fan, it's difficult to just love one particular part of history, because each aspect has its own, intrigues. And, why would you pick one when you can read anything?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I look at my bookshelf now and I've got so many different types of subjects, because I think, well, most of the time, if you're on one subject, sometimes you end up repeating it and you're like, oh, yes, I read that before, and it. And it is interesting because that confirms your kind of knowledge and what you're taking in and understanding. But to me, there's so much out there that's so cool and different. And, like one of the books I've got up here is like Kate Lister's A Curious History of Sex. Like, that's just so different and something you wouldn't imagine there is a history of, but she's written a huge book on it, and I'm excited to jump into it to be like, what on earth has she researched and found for all these years? Because of course there's going to be like a history of sex. I've got cracking like some rugby history books as well. There's just so much depth
on my bookshelf, and there's one about Philip and Alexander the Great, which is absolutely brilliant. Adrian Codsworthy wrote that, and I'm reading it now, just about to finish it. It's fantastic if you get a chance. And there's The Brothers York by Thomas Penn. There's loads. There's just so much. If you're interested in history, just jump in. There's so many different things, isn't there?
Yeah, 100%. That's all you can do.
Have you thought about content production as for you, building your personal brand? Because you've done all these amazing things. So you're quite active on Twitter, on history Twitter. But have you thought about building yourself out with your content production for your personal brand?
I don't know yet. I think maybe one day, but again, I may seem probably quite confident and I can talk about it. It's because right now you've got me in like history live mode. But in terms of, I don't see myself like that. It's a huge confidence thing I probably don't have still, which might come with a couple of years down the line and age and gaining more experience. And I might come across that. But right now, it's like my dad said to me, he's like, a lot of TV work is freelance work, and he's like, oh, you need to have a name for your company, like a production whatever you're doing. And I'm going, I don't need a name because I am my name. I want to be remembered for me and what I do. It just sucks that I always joke my last name's Smith because it's so bloody typical. It doesn't stand out anywhere. That's the only downside, but at least then I am my own brand. So I think maybe as years come, I will consider it, but it's just, I want to feel more established, I want to make my mark a bit more.
Yeah, no, I absolutely understand that. And for you, what is the biggest positive of the history industry, I guess, if you could describe it like that?
I think it's like the education side of it. As like I said before, I wanted to go into teaching because I love the subject so much, and I thought I have such passionate teachers who got me through GCSEs, A levels, and my degree. But for me to stand in front of a class, and I remember my history lessons so well at high school, and knowing I was one of 4 who really enjoyed it and the rest just didn't care, that would dishearten me so much. But now the positive of being a public historian is I've got my podcast. People listen because they want to listen and they enjoy it. People watch the TV documentaries because they're interested and they want to watch it again too, or they'll engage with me on Twitter because they like history. So the positive is that the education is there without it, say, being forced. It's a positive education. That's how I always describe it, because I never want it to be people to go, oh, I find it boring in school, etc. I want them to go, oh, I've just learned something new.
I completely agree with you about
engaged with it.
Being at school and being one of the very few in the class. Shout out to Mr. Leach from our
Shout
old
out to Mr.
school.
Barber.
There you go. You know, and he was brilliant, and I had him in sixth form, and I think he used to get really frustrated because I loved history, but I was awful at the argument side of it. I would just say, I'd just write you 8 pages of what happened, and I just loved, telling the story almost, but I could never do the whole argument bit. But he was so enthusiastic, and we was probably one of 4 people, like you say, in the class that loved history.
It's tough, and I look back on it now and I remember being such a geek, because I think for me in high school especially is when I really started to get into history. I remember it was my way of really getting into military history is because I had an English teacher in year 10 actually show us the first 20 minutes of Private Ryan in our English literature, which is so odd because she wanted us to work our creativity and describing and all this other stuff. But after that I then went home to mum, was like, we watched this, and she was like, oh, his Band of Brothers, go watch that. And I just got hooked. So then when I was going into history lessons, it was like this new world really become enlightened to me. Even though I was passionate already, I was then even more hooked because I was like, well, what more can we learn? And there was one moment with my history teacher, and me and him were the only people who laughed, and we did I think we did medicine through time and surgery of as well.
Yeah.
Oh, my favorite, but I love the history of medicine. I think it's
Hippocrates.
Oh my god, all of that, and the 4 humours, and I find it utterly fascinating. And so he showed us a clip from Horrible Histories, which is about the Great Plague. And honestly, I think it's series 1 episode, I don't know how much I know, it's like 7 or 9. It's around that. It's in the first series, and honestly, it's one of the funniest clips I've ever seen in my life. And he bawled he just couldn't stop laughing. Neither could I. We're the only people in the whole class of 30. And I think at that moment for me, I was like, oh, this is it for me. This is where I'm going.
The path set.
Yeah, the path was set at that moment of enjoyment and laughter.
So for you on the other side of this, though, what would be some less favourable aspects of this industry?
I think that you can get some very interesting characters in the TV world. And for me, I'm quite a sensitive person, to say the least. So it is very much requiring a backbone. As I said, the job before, just only a couple of weeks ago, that closed the door on me. I was very relieved, but I was so excited for the job. I honestly thought it was fantastic. And I do agree, the company's fantastic. The job is brilliant, but the people were so awful. I come away crying so much, and I only did a total of because I did part-time 2 days a week, I did maybe 10-12 days for them, and I felt awful every time because they were just so rude and awful. It's very cliquey, but it's this is the only downside. You hear it a lot. You will have a difficult producer, you'll have a difficult director or something, and it's just simply gritting your teeth. And I listen to sounds silly, but Scrubs rewatch podcasts because I absolutely love Scrubs, and hearing Zach Braff talking about being a director, but then he said the other week saying, well, you get people coming on and they have horrible directors. He went, but I never wanted to be like that. I wanted to be friendly. I wanted people to enjoy the environment. And I kind of now got that in my head that if I'm ever in that position, of course, I always want people to feel welcome and loving. And I think having that I was a captain at hockey, and then I was president of a university, and everyone seemed to feel they could trust me and everything like that. And I hope that leadership style can be reflected further on in jobs, so that I can change that environment, because I think TV can be very stressful. It's very money driven, unfortunately. One of the other negative sides is that in terms of history, they don't care about the history, whereas I do. And so I have to kind of grit my teeth in the sense that in the edit, something that could be really important to me is not important to other people, because it's not sellable. It's not what would make people watch it, because that's always the intention. So it's kind of that acceptance, which I definitely have now, but is now being like, right, okay, deep breaths.
Have you watched, because Netflix have got quite a selection of sort of historical documentaries on, and I started watching the Medici series. Have you watched that?
No, my brother binged that not that long ago. I really want to watch it because I love Italian history.
Yeah, I don't know how accurate it is, but it really seems to put the history at the forefront. And it's fantastic. And they've done a few other they've done like a history of Rome documentary where they go through the emperors.
Cool.
And I think it is becoming, because these series or these services, sorry, like Netflix and like Dan Snow's History Hit, you know, people that have the interest are going to them, so they can be more specific on what they do.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
hopefully, as you progress in your career, you know, these things will become more commonplace, and the history will take to the front.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm hoping for. And I think for me, I see historians kick off to be like, that's not historically accurate when it comes to like a film or a drama. And I'm like, but the whole point is, if a documentary to me is accurate, that's fine, because that's got to be telling the truth. And that's where you want the truth in.
Yeah.
But I would rather watch something entertaining. Look at Bridgerton. Did you guys watch it?
Do you know what? I didn't.
Oh my God, watch it. Even just for like the production scale in that sense, you know, whatever. It's obviously very much romantic, but like the ability, like, and this is what I find fascinating, like that Downton Abbey, how they bring it to life and they use little historical kind of nods and there's little details that are really accurate, but who cares if the story isn't completely accurate, because what they're doing is creating and bringing history to life. So then it's how I got into it. Band of Brothers is how I learned everything about the Second World War and inspired my whole military history kind of thing and where I've ended up now. But someone could be watching Bridgerton or Downton and going, oh my God, that's so interesting history, and pick up a book or go read an article online or listen to a podcast about that history because they were interested. And I think that's the power in it. It doesn't always have to be correct, but it has to be that magic, so
it's
it
in
brings
the right
it
context,
to life.
isn't it?
Definitely.
So we like to talk a little bit about salary expectations for people when they go into the industry. So we go away, look at some average data and see if it fits with what you've said. So we picked TV Researcher.
Yeah.
And the average salary apparently in the UK is around £30,000. But going on what you said, you know, it's freelance as well. So really, it's really difficult to come up with an average figure because it's about opportunities and how much you work, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, what's the monthly for 30k?
I don't know. What's
I really don't know.
Jules is a bit of a mathematician.
Go
Come
on,
on, Jules.
do some quick maths.
It's going to be about
over
monthly.
He's been put under pressure.
I can't even think.
It's probably around. It sounds about 2,000, something like that. Maybe over.
Yeah,
a bit over 2,000.
A bit over, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't. Do you know what? I really don't know, because like when I started last year, I think when I was initially on 2 weeks, I swear when I broke it down, I was on like 60 odd quid a day. This was to do like 2 weeks in London. Obviously I didn't live in London, it's commuting and all this stuff as well.
So
like
the travel wiped out your money.
Oh my God, it did. And like I wasn't, obviously, like I said, I finished my degree, I didn't work for 4 months, and I was so fortunate that my dad, he's a quantity surveyor, and he was like, look, here's some money just to get you by for these 2 weeks until you get paid. And I'm so grateful for that, and I've paid him back since. But to then sit down my director when he offered me the full-time job and was like, okay, so what salary do you want? And I was like, I have no clue. Like, I didn't know what to ask for, what to do. I didn't know what seemed cheeky. And I kind of went higher to then negotiate a bit lower. But since then, every job I've got, and I've bumped it up my day rate, a tenner or 20 quid, depending on how big the company is. And especially for one I've just worked for, I spoke with a lovely producer the other week. She works in TV and stuff. She's just got a book come out, actually. Helen Carr, throw her name out there. And she told me she went, this is what you should be going for now with your experience. So when I got asked, what's your weekly rate? I was like, this. And they were like, yeah, okay, cool. And I thought,
yeah.
So I think it is dependent on the production company. I think the bigger you can probably wing it, and the more experience as well. And like, obviously working from home has been such a blessing, because it's like we're not really spending much at all. So to still kind of be cheeky with my day rate and thinking, wow, this is nice. But I think it is one of these things that it will go up in time, like obviously with anything.
Yeah. And what is something that you never expected to have to deal with in this industry, but you do?
Oh, that's
something that's not in the job description.
The hours, because it is set out that you can be told this is your week rate, but they'll go, you need to work basically all night on the Wednesday because we need this delivered Thursday morning.
Right.
Like, or you have to work a weekend here, or film. You know, I've only done bits of filming on location. Obviously, COVID has put a bit of a halt to that. But it is, I think, the unpredictable nature of filming and the kind of not toll, but what you really have to get yourself into and doing. And I see that as a really interesting challenge, because it's like, especially this year I've been at home, I'm like, bring it on. I'm happy to be on set now till like 11 at night or longer and doing things, because it's like you get the job done at the end of the day. The channel, most of the time, the channel, if you deliver the 1, 2, 3 episodes, then they pay. You don't get paid when they commission it, kind of thing. So it is really a money driven industry because they need things to be produced and done. So I think that's kind of not really in the job description. You could think it's 9 to 5, but most of the time it won't be. So it's kind of balanced. But then you will have moments where, especially last year, it comes to the end of production, I was working in the garden doing bits, and then it was like, oh cool, I'm done. I just did 2 hours work. I'm not going to say anything else now. Like, so it has its swings and roundabouts, and I'd say.
And what's two of your best pieces of advice for anyone listening to this and thinking, do you know what, I'd like to do what she's done?
Oh, network. Don't ever be afraid to network and just go up and ask someone for help. I mean, I've always said I've had so many people who I've just popped up to and say, hi, can I have any advice, or I want to learn. You know, if you're keen and you're so interested and you want to learn, people will always be like, oh my god, I got help, I will help you. That's probably like my first one. And then my second one would be like, I think especially if you really are interested in history, it's like we said before, if you're not too sure on where you want to go, don't panic, because there are so many avenues of history that you probably aren't even aware of, and your universities and schools actually aren't aware of either. So there are hundreds of historians on Twitter and stuff. I mean, always drop me, I'm happy, my DMs are open if you want to drop me like a message to talk about things or whatever, like, because there are loads of opportunities out there. It's just necessarily spending that real time and finding them. That is the key thing here.
And would you still go into this industry knowing everything you know now?
Yeah, definitely. I think I always, like I said, I keep coming back to it, but Band of Brothers got me into it. And I think really I knew back then I wanted to be in something that brought history to life, because how else can you do it? I think it's so fascinating that TV and film can create a moment in time that we literally will never see ever. And yet they have this ability to do so. And, you know, when I went through other like Downton Abbey and loads of, I love period dramas and films, so I think for me I was always going to end up down that route. It was just the case of how, and I think I was so lucky to start off where I have, because that was my how.
Well, Olivia, it's been a genuine pleasure talking to you and
you
geeking out with a bit of history. So thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. Where can people find you on social media?
So I'm just Olivia Smith Hist on Twitter. Come find me there. It's where you'll see all of my content. And yeah, like I said, if you've got any questions, feel free to drop me a message.
Thanks so much, Olivia.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.